Hey, listeners, you have landed on episode 76 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, where today we flipped the script and my friend Paul interviewed me. So we talked about all things related to fire department health and wellness programs. I think you're going to enjoy this episode a lot. Quick announcement. I did a poll on social media and with my email list. If you were to be able to attend a free 1-hour webinar from some of the top researchers in the world, would you show up and what do you want to hear about? Thank you so much for all of your feedback. Based on that, this is in the works for November. So, action item for you, make sure that you're on my email list because that's how you're going to get the information about the free webinar. I will, of course, put the link in the show notes. Please enjoy this episode with Paul. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey listeners, it's AZ. Welcome back for another episode of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. And today, shit's getting weird. Today, my guest is Paul Pongratz. Paul, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
Hello to the people. And it's weird because after I ask him the rapid fire questions, we're going to flip the script and he's going to interview me about setting up health and wellness programs, so on and so forth. And the reason, the backstory is he is one of the most, I would say, like number one participation person in my podcast. I think he listens to all of them. He reposts it. I appreciate that so much. And then always when I ask a question like, hey, what do you guys want to hear about? He always has an answer. So I figured he would be the perfect person for this job. But before we get into the nitty gritty, first question, who is Paul Pongratz?
Well, it's kind of, I do a bio for my own classes that I help teach in our own department. But I started off with I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a dad dog, as you can see, and then I'm a firefighter. And can be fluent in movie quotes and sarcasm. And I tell most people when they ask me where my name came from, I just said my parents named me after the Apostle Paul or the actor Paul Newman. And then they're like, who's Paul Newman? Like, gee, thanks. All right, let's go into some 80s movies quotes. So,
Speaking of 80s movies quotes, well, let's not get that specific.
yeah.
Tell me your favorite movie and then your favorite quote.
There's so many of them. I would say depending on what is going on in my world at the time, but I would have to say that the first Top Gun was probably one of my most favorite movies. And I say that because that was one of the first movies I remember my dad taking me to as a kid, and it was like an old school like movie theater. Like they played one movie at a time. It wasn't one of these megaplexes or anything like that. And I remember seeing so many other movies there with my family. It's always good memories. And then and that's kind of translated it later in life where my son he's a big fan of the movies, and we do sci-fi Fridays or Sundays or Saturdays or whatever's playing local. But I would probably say my favorite movie quote is actually comes from Three Amigos when he's talking about the word plethora. When the guys are kind of at Awapu's birthday party, and they're like, would you say I have a plethora of gifts? And he's like, see. And my son started using the word plethora not too long ago, and I asked him, I said, where did you learn this word? He said, like, well, you've watched Three Amigos around me, and I remember that. I'm like, all right, fair enough. So.
That's funny. I was hoping you were going to say my cousin Vinny, so then we could say my father's a mechanic, my brother's a mechanic, my two uncles are mechanics.
Well, that's also an outstanding movie, but it's I don't know. I would say
You're
probably just I could probably go like have conversations with my friends outside of fire service with movie quotes and just we couldn't talk about anything else, but we could talk about everything from Top Gun to Van Wilder with my cousin Vinny in between. So
Well, yes, it's very much like my friend Megan, the rescue RD, is staying with me this week,
mhm.
and she and I communicate primarily through memes.
There you
So
go.
I understand. All right, so next tough question. What sets your soul on fire?
I think sharing knowledge, sharing the connections that I've made, and it's having time on the job and being a dad for a while. It's I really get that thrill when these little bit of successes happen in my kids' lives, but also these younger folks that are coming in the fire service where, I know not everybody comes out of the fire academy like a rock star, and by no means was I ever one. But when I see like folks that I used to mentoring the next generation, it's like, man, this is a cool watching of the passing of the torch, and especially where I'm at the point where I'm a lot closer to the end than I am the beginning, which is very weird a lot. And but just seeing like, hey, I shared this failure of mine and turned it into a training routine and have made it a success for somebody else. And it's just I don't know. It's like I got a thrill when I was teaching my daughter how to ride a bike, and the first day I was able to let go of that seat, and just she realized she's like, "Dad, I'm doing it. I'm doing it." I'm like, "All right," and I'm like, now we're getting to the point where she's like, "Can you take me driving?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, we'll find a
Oh,
parking lot."
God.
But she's actually very cautious, and which I'm glad she's learning how to drive differently than how she rode a bike because I taught her how to crash first. So I said, we're not going to teach you how to crash in a car, but yeah, that sharing of knowledge, that seeing those little successes, those little wins, it's just it brings a really cool feeling.
I think that's a great answer. And I am really glad you're not teaching your daughter how to crash the car. Solid plan. And
Yes,
then final, final tricky, hot light bulb question. How are you changing the world?
I think just being who I am. I don't claim to be an expert at a lot of things. Actually, I'm really not an expert at anything. I just, I share that knowledge. But I think I see the opportunities where people might be failing or they might be struggling. And I don't necessarily, I'm able to identify that and I'm able to give folks a little bit wider view where if you're struggling with something in particular and and your podcast and a lot of other podcasts bring up like different topics and they may mirror around just fitness, they may mirror around behavioral health, but when I can talk to somebody that's like, hey, I'm having a hard time with this type of drill or I'm having a hard time with my fitness, I'm like, well, let's look at the bigger picture and see this wider view. Is it like, is it your strength, is it something else, is it there's so much a wider view, and I think people get caught up in the the goal that they're trying to attain, but they don't see the wider view that they need to obtain that goal, which may seem unrealistic at the time, but when you look at a bigger picture, it is. And I think it took me a long time to find that method of how I learned, where I'd have a goal and I wouldn't obtain it. I'm like, man, this is frustrating. And then once I started looking at things at a bigger picture, it's like, all right, there's a lot more than just X, Y, Z. It's the entire alphabet. And I think just listening to people and making those subtle suggestions, um, folks can start to find a different path that works for them better versus what is, whatever the next influencer is doing or what's the most popular thing at the time.
That is such a cool way to think of it. And I always get metaphors and analogies messed up. I think this is a metaphor, but it's very much like the human body. If someone comes to me and says, AZ, my knee hurts, the knee is like the last thing I look at because I zoom way out to the 30,000-foot view and I start asking them questions about their sleep and their stress and their hydration and their nutrition. And they're kind of like, but my knee, but my knee. And then once we start zooming in, I'm looking at their hip and their ankle and their spinal movement and how they walk. And they're still like, but my knee, but my knee. But most of the time, it's not about the knee. And so I think that perfectly sort of represents exactly what you just said about how you're changing the world. I love that.
It's an
Amazing.
application that it goes well with a lot of things that go on in my life. Where, yeah, as each aspect in my life has changed, where and I tell like the new recruits that come in, I'm like, hey, you're a single firefighter with no responsibilities other than yourself. Hey, this is the time to it's a great time to learn. You introduce a wife and a kid into the mix, your priorities are going to change. You take a bigger role in your department, your view needs to be much wider. Where as a parent, I mean, we've lived through COVID, where my kids are going to be more resilient in life than I'll ever be, because they had to self learn some stuff that I would have been 4 years behind by the time I got to high school, where they're doing math programs that I don't even know how to begin to spell, and 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 I'm seeing that with our with the generational change, where it's easy to say like this generations blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, there's some generational gaps, but there's always going to be those. But if we can take a wider view at people's experiences, and I feel like I'm a competent company officer, but my wide view is I can kind of tailor to different needs with the aspects of my crew, because not one firefighter is the same, and I enjoy what the shit your firefighters say, because I got one that's like, man, you are in left field today, but why is that? And it's looking at his the wide view of him versus my elder, who he started his career later and is in his 60s, but he's running circles around the young folks because he was a worker all his life, and that's the wide view that I see with him. And so it's practical. I can apply it to everything. Some of it's more successful. You know, Talking to a teenager versus a 10-year-old is definitely more challenging with the wider view.
Well, you're not kidding. And also, I just wrote down on my notes, I haven't recently done a shit my firefighters say, and I have a backlog of good ones. So, when I started the fire service, I actually, we had these little notebooks. And well, the listeners can't see, but
Mhm.
they're like little 3x5 notebooks where they were to take notes on the patient, meds and histories
Yeah.
and whatever. But I used to flip mine over and just write down all the stupid shit everyone said every day. I have volumes of those. And then unfortunately, when the iPhone came out, I was like, oh, I'll just keep this digitally. And I started running them in my notes section.
Mhm.
And then, one of the updates, I lost a whole bunch of them. And it's a bummer. I never should have gone away from the paper. But after we get off the call, I'm definitely going to post one. Look for it. All right, so we're 12 minutes in, and now I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of let's work through some challenges and questions and all of the things. You are now in charge, my friend.
All
The
right.
comms are yours.
All right. I have become. All right. So I know when we look at the statistics in the fire service, I'm not going to really get into, because we all know what's killing us. We know the cancer, we know cardiac, we know suicide, and when we look at wellness programs, I know um, it's a wide view type thing. So when we get to that point where, say, a department doesn't have one, and I feel very fortunate for my department that we have one that has grown over years. By no means are we perfect or anything, and we got plenty of room to grow, but that also comes from not being satisfied with anything. But if if you identify this need in a department, what would you say the very first step would be? Would it be just let's find every single component we need, or would you start with buy-in?
It's a really good question. The first thing you said the word need, and the first thing that I always do with the department is an actual formal needs analysis. So, for example, XYZ Fire Department calls me up and they set up a consultation and maybe they bring me into the department. And many times they have a laundry list of things that they're telling me, like our firefighters need they need to be more cardiovascularly fit, and we have so many injuries, and our fire ground performance is not great. So they have this laundry list of things they're telling me. But when I really do a comprehensive needs analysis where I sit down with all the stakeholders, I sit down with the rank and file, the blue shirt firefighters. I sit down with the line officers, with the administrative officers, with the union, with the village or city or town or whatever, and possibly with workers' comp. When I really sit down with all of those entities, what I find is that sometimes what they think they need isn't exactly what they really need. So, for example, I had a department one time tell me, like, our back injuries are out of this world. They are killing us. Like, we got to get a back health program, and we've got to get, they had like this whole list of what we got to get. And when I actually sat down and talked to them, they had a lot of firefighters. It was a big department, around 500 firefighters, which is big for me. Mm-hmm. And they had one back injury in 3 years. Now, granted, that back injury was catastrophically expensive. And so I see how that becomes the lens and the focus. But when you really think about it, back injuries weren't the problem. It was all of these little injuries. I twisted my ankle on the fire ground. They were still time loss injuries, but they weren't the super ultra expensive injuries. But when you added up all of those little injuries, it came to just as much as that one catastrophic back injury. And when I really sat down and looked at the personnel in the fire department, what I saw was many of them were overweight and obese. And one of the biggest predictors of those little nagging type injuries, slip, trip, fall, and I twisted my ankle and is overweight and obesity. It's a predictor. And then another predictor is a previous injury. So once you have an injury, you're more apt to get injured again. And so when I really looked at the data, what I found was their problem wasn't the back injuries. Their problem was their overall fitness. So both strength and conditioning. And once I sort of broke it down for them that way, they went, oh, that makes sense. And so to circle back to your actual question, the first thing I always look at is the needs analysis. But then I also have to listen to what they're saying. I can't just ignore the fact that they're saying we have this catastrophic back injury issue. I can't just ignore that. So what I try to do is make for them sort of a sandwich of what they want, what they really need, and a little more of what they really want. And then that seems to be palatable. And because I've asked the stakeholders, I've asked the blue shirts, I've asked the admin, I've asked the union what they want and need, then there's that element of trust. And trust is just another way, buy-in is another way to say trust. Mm-hmm. And so if they feel like everyone is acting in their best interests, that buy-in and trust becomes a little bit more natural, I think. So that would be, first of all, did that answer your question? Because that was a lot of words.
It was a lot of words, but it answered, multiple facets of that question where I think sometimes with buy-in, people look at like, well, do I need to get buy-in of the senior staff first or the field forces? Which both are important because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you wear a blue shirt or a white shirt, you still have that firefighter attached to your name. And if there's buy-in at both levels where, hey, if senior staff is going to be doing the same fitness program that we're going to be doing working the line, okay, I can buy into this. But if this is one of those, all right, because I work on a fire engine and not in the office, my standard's going to be different, and it causes a little, can cause a little distrust, or just like, oh, this is just one more program. In looking at the overall needs assessment, that's one of those wider view things that I don't think a lot of line firefighters might understand, because they're just like, hey, we need this. And one of the things I had a firefighter come to me and ask, um, and as the station captain, one of my things, I have to budget for equipment and make the request. And firefighter came to me and he said, we should get these types of pieces of exercise equipment. I said, okay, great. Tell me why. Write it out, a little proposal. Find me some solutions how it's going to be functional to us. And it was a sled, and it was a couple of strongman sandbags that were about kind of like a torso of a body. And she did a wonderful job writing it up. And I sent it up the line, and it was at the end of the financial year. I said, probably won't hear anything until after July, and I did. And they're like, hey, we're going to go ahead and do these things. Appreciate the way you put it out there. And it's like, all right. And gave her where credit was due. It's like, hey, thanks for doing this part, because it makes it a lot easier to get buy-in at the next level, to say, hey, this is going to help us drag a person out. This is going to help us drag that 5-inch down the street, or whatever. And getting that wide view passed on to some of the field firefighters, it makes it, I feel like it builds a lot more of that trust, where it's like, okay, this is just not one more program that we're going to have to do. This is going to give us longevity in our career. This is going to help us get to our ultimate goal of retirement, and where we're not, hunched over like some of these retired folks are.
Well, and I love the pieces of equipment that she asked for, because although at my department I feel very blessed and lucky, we have really nice Woodway treadmills. Those things cost more than some used cars. Like, they're
Mhm.
$10,000 to $12,000. They're very rugged and sturdy. But here's the problem. The footprint is very big. Our spaces are very small, and exactly one person can use it at a time. And so that provides some limitations. Whereas the pieces of equipment that she requested, 4 or 5 people can be working out at the same time with the 2 sandbags and the sled by just kind of going in a circuit. And so, yeah, that was a awesome request. Give her kudos.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'll be going to the next question now.
All right, let's
All
go.
right. So, with all the different things that you may find in a needs assessment, say like strength and conditioning is in one facet. Um, would you include cardiac health within that, or would that be separate from strength and conditioning?
Yeah, so I put the cardiac health kind of under the conditioning
Okay.
facet. And it's really interesting. I just revised my PDFs for for administrators. Okay, so I have 3 free PDFs, and one of them's for administrators. And I just revised it. And what I always have felt is that if you're not doing anything in terms of health and wellness, I think your first step should be getting comprehensive medical testing for your firefighters. I felt strongly about that, but I'm going to backtrack for 1 second. I still feel strongly,
Mm-hmm.
but I just consulted with Dr. Matos. His name is. He's in the Quad Cities, Illinois, Iowa, Quad Cities area. And he is very, very, very knowledgeable about NFPA 1582. And he also, I believe, was previous military.
Okay.
And Dr. Matos broke it down for me like this. He said, Annette, we have primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. And I'm like, tell me more. He said, Annette, primary prevention is exercise, sleep, nutrition, moving your body, relaxation techniques, whatever you can think of. That's primary prevention. Secondary prevention is going to your doctor and getting tests. Let's say your blood sugar is yay or nay, your cholesterol, all of those things. And then the tertiary prevention is when you find out I have high blood pressure, I have this intervention, which is either medication or weight loss or walking or whatever. That's the tertiary. And he said, Annette, if people aren't doing anything, the primary prevention part of it is the biggest piece. Yes, we want to know that they're unwell, but we also want them doing something regardless. And so I'm not going to revise my PDF, but I am going to acknowledge that he is absolutely right. And so part of that needs analysis is to realize that we can do something without having a formal medical testing procedure in place. So we can emphasize to our crews the importance of cardiovascular health, the importance of nutrition, give people actual time to make lunch and dinner and actual time to use the sandbags that you just got and the sled, as opposed to filling our days so full of stuff that no one has any time for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that's a problem that we find, and I don't know, it's not isolated to any one department because as the role of the fire service has changed to the all hazards agency, everything is important from you helping Mrs. Smith off the ground to the next cardiac arrest or the occasional fire, and then public demos and all that. And it's like by the time you get done with these work hours of a 24-hour shift, it's like, do I really feel like I have time to do this? And and we make time. And my station that I'm assigned to now, we're not consistent with our run volume. Some days we'll run 10 calls, some days we'll run 2 calls, but it's like a couple of the guys, they try to work out at the same time every day, but also I arrange the day around what they may need. Like if we have a demo at 10 o'clock, it's like, all right, guys, go get your workout done either before or after. I'm not going to add a dozen other things. And I have a very good chief right now that's just like, hey, I trust you what you need to do. Just at the end of the work cycle, we need to have X, Y, and Z done. All right, good. So, but also with that, and kind of before I went on that tangent, you had a good segue with the 1582 physicals that I wanted to ask questions about as well. And I feel fortunate because we've always had a very good physical program in my department, and it has expanded. We've got away from the local health department that was doing it to a doctor's group that has an outstanding occupational health doctor that when we do have something come across his desk, he's just not like, all right, he's helping us find those specialists that understand members of the fire service, which I know you can go to your doctor. I can go to my PCP and be like, hey, this is what I do, but I don't expect him to understand every facet of the fire service and why if I had to go on this medication wouldn't be as conducive as I went on another. So with 1582 physicals, I know that most localities may offer, but if there's a locality that is just starting, like, hey, they got a physical when they got hired, and because that's what was required, but now they're like, hey, we want to save money with our firefighters' health, so we're going to do annual physicals. What I'd say my question is, what should an organization look for with the best type of doctor to find? I guess is should they stick with if there's an occupational health program that might be the best course of action. But what if you're in a locality that doesn't have one of those options available? Where should they look at with getting the right type of doctor to conduct a physical for their firefighters?
That's a really great question. And it's my understanding that there are a fair amount of companies now, mobile companies, that actually bring like a semi trailer out to your department or an RV, whatever, mobile home with mobile testing equipment. Now, I'm sure, my guest last week was Rachel from the middle of nowhere, Vermont. Pretty sure that there's probably not a mobile testing company available for middle of nowhere, Vermont. But I think that there are some pretty good companies nationwide that not only provide the NFPA compliant physicals and the occupational health doctor to go with it, but you can also opt into the fitness testing. And I believe they do the IAFF, Wellness and Fitness Initiative testing. So the treadmill and the jump test and all those normal tests. Yeah. And so for a department that has nothing, that sort of mobile option seems to be a really, really great option. Mm-hmm. But incidentally, I'm working on a committee in the state of Illinois called the Resiliency Committee that we formed in our convention in 2022. And one of the things that we're looking at is providing upstream and downstream interventions, resources for firefighters. So upstream would be, of course, like I'm having a problem, I'm raising my hand, I need mental health intervention or something like that. Downstream would be things like sleep and nutrition and medical physicals. So of course I'm working on the downstream part. And so my colleague, Andy, and I have been looking at sort of this spectrum. So let's just say your department's like, I'm so sorry, Paul, I know you need a comprehensive medical physical. We just can't spring for it. Like, minimal case scenario would be going to your doctor and getting a comprehensive metabolic panel, lipid profile, and just a basic checkup. That would be like bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
And then, adding things, of course, like the PSA screening for prostate cancer and the hands-on check for thyroid and testicular cancer and those types of things. That would be kind of like a segue into getting something going before the department's able to do something. Because here's the thing. Should departments take care of us? I wholeheartedly feel like they should. But I also feel like we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, they're not taking care of us, so I'm not going to do anything. So I do believe that we have personal responsibility in both our fitness and wellness and our medical testing of taking the bull by the horns if we're not getting what we need.
I feel like I've answered that question for you before when you posted one of your questions on Instagram of like, do you think that, pretty much that statement, and I wholeheartedly agree. Like, if we take this job, there's a level of responsibility with your locality to provide, if they expect you to be healthy and in shape, to provide, some type of program, some type of health and wellness options. But it is up to me as the individual to eat right, to make time to work out, whether it's on duty or off duty, to be able to fulfill that, that oath we're swearing to, and that description of the job that we're trying to fill out. So I see there's a level of personal responsibility for that, and along with physicals, where if your department doesn't have a program where you're going to see an occupational health specialist or the tractor trailer of doom and gloom coming to scan everything, it's on me to use my insurance to go get a physical. Like, hey, your heart's good, but your cholesterol is creeping up, so you might want to think about doing this or doing that. And I would say at getting older, that's one of the things that I have my fire department physical in my birth month, and that's how we do ours in our departments. Your birth month, that's you get your physical done, and depending what your job role is in the department, you might get a few extra things like hazmat or fire marshals. They get a few things that the line firefighters don't get. But then 6 months after my city physical, I do my physical with my PCP, which is not anywhere near where the level of testing, but it's still like I maintain that relationship there because I know at some point I'm not gonna I'm gonna be retired, and I need to have that relationship with a doctor where, okay, he may not understand everything a firefighter does, but he has that history of like, all right, now while this might be elevated, this is because his sleep cycles suck, or um, you know his threshold of pain of ignoring this aches and pains is a whole lot higher. So when he's come to me with an ache of pain, that's a pretty significant thing for him. So
Well, it's interesting. I just listened to an episode of the Behind the Shield podcast. I'm
mhm.
actually not finished with it. It's kind of a long episode. It's Jared, I'm going to slaughter it. I think it's Jared Vermeulen. He was a firefighter and the author of The Modern Fire Officer.
Yep, I just finished that.
So, yeah, but here's what I thought. I was cheering in my car because everything he was saying was endorsing everything that I spoke about at the tactical annual with my return on investment speech. And one of the things that he said is that we firefighters are the people that shield everyone else from seeing the grisly impact of life. Okay.
Mhm.
We're the ones that have to cut the family out of the car that didn't survive. And because we're the ones that do that, the rest of the public can just go thoughts and prayers like they do on Facebook, right? So, because we are basically the shit umbrella that protects the public from having to even know that things like that happen, he's like, we need to take care of these people. And the people in the community should want to take care of the people so that they can continue to be gleefully oblivious to what actually is going on. I literally was cheering in my car.
Yeah, that I finished that one the other day, and it was a lot of the right things. And I know James was very interested, with the shift schedule because they work the 24/72, which, I know we have kitchen table debates on a regular basis about the 24/48, 48/96, and we work what's called I call it a 7/21, where we over 3 weeks, 21 days, we'll work 7 shifts, and like I took the day off. Our cycle technically started Tuesday, so it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday, with 3 days off, and those 3 day breaks. Man, there's a lot of recovery that comes in with that, and if you're not working overtime or part time or whatever, and then we work a Friday, Sunday, and then have 2 days off, and then work a Wednesday, and then have 5 off in a row, and it's the only schedule that I've ever worked, and but at the same time, it's like I took today off and Saturday off, and it's like I felt today just we had a rough Tuesday, and with equipment breaking down, and then running normal call volume, and then one or two overnight calls where it's like, all right, let's practice some of that 62 Romeo stuff while I'm trying to go back to bed here, and then but today waking up, it's like I had 2 days without any interruptions, and it's like, wow, all right, I feel like I can tackle everything, even though I was like feeling that little bit of an anxiety level yesterday morning where I'm like, 3 hours ain't cutting it. So
How many battalions does it take to cover that schedule?
we have 3 shifts,
Oh,
so it's three platoons, and we have had 3 shifts since I think it's either late '70s or early '80s, where we were I think ahead in the area because a lot of when I talked to a lot of senior folks, they were like, when I came on, there was a lot of guys that got hired in the '70s, and they said I got hired for the third shift, and they said they put all the new people and the troublemakers on the C shift, and well, I started on the C shift. So, um, but and our fire chief, he when he announced his retirement the other day, he kind of gave a long dissertation of like, hey, this is how it was, and then um, they would work I forget how many days, and then would have a Kelly day, and so they would only have to work 10 days in a row before they got 3 days off, and then And then they gave us an extra color day, so we only had to work, this amount before we had one. And he said, then they had a third shift. I'm like, all this in a paycheck too? Awesome. So,
It's all perspective.
oh
If
yeah,
it's
yeah.
getting better, it just seems a lot better.
Well, I was listening to some other. I listened to a handful of podcasts, but this one guy was talking about his great grandfather was working for Providence Fire Department, and he said, yeah, they worked for 14 days in a row, and they're like, and the guys were like, yeah, day on, day off. They're like, no, 14 days in a row, but they could go home for lunch. And I'm like, and of course, this was steam drawn engine days. I'm like, oh my gosh, no wonder the divorce rate was horrible. So, but that and shift schedules and sleep and stuff. That's going to lead me to my next question. So, with the overall needs assessment, do you do anything with shift schedules or sleep recovery?
So I can obviously shed light on issues with the shift schedule, and there are researchers that are actively recruiting departments who would love to do a study for your department or anyone else's department on the feasibility of is 24/48 better than 48/96, or obviously 24/72 is going to be superior to,
Mm-hmm.
I think, both of those schedules. But so I just recognize and point out to them the limitations and issues with sleep. I also ask them questions like this: do your tones go off in all the stations 24 hours a day? And if so, why? Because there's no reason to wake up station 2 when station 1 is going on a call. That's just because we've always done it and it doesn't make sense. What is your policy with rest time, downtime, and napping at your stations? How do you go about educating your personnel on the importance of sleep? And then also, if you are doing your yearly physicals, is a sleep screening tool such as the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index a part of your screening? Because most people don't know that between 37 and 70% of firefighters have a sleep disorder. And in most of them, it's undiagnosed and untreated. So even though we're getting crappy sleep on duty, we also likely have sleep disorders that are further compromising our quantity and quality of sleep. So I try to shed light on it. There isn't a lot I can do about it.
Yeah, and I know that's one of the things that's been improved. Like I have seen change over time, where um, when people think of health and wellness and recruitment and retention, nobody really considers like development of new buildings part of that. And being part of a project where when I was promoted to captain, I was at a single engine station. We had the common bunk room, separate room for the officers, but we only had one unit that ran out of there. So it's like, hey, tones went off, tones went off. We knew we were getting up. Now that when that building was replaced, we have the chief running out of there. We have a ladder truck. We have an ambulance running out of there, but we also have individual bunk rooms, and we have the Phoenix G2 system where you if you're on this truck one day, you push the button and you know you can turn up the volume to your liking. And there's been a few times I've looked up. I'm like, I hear some talking, but I'm like, all right, why is the oh yeah, it's us, it's for us, and we're up. Which that has been probably one of the most significant um, technology things that we're using all across. Now we still got a lot of old buildings with the common bunk rooms and but also know that light versus all the house lights coming on is a little less stressful. Um, and then just the individual bunk rooms where I know like when I teach stress first aid to our recruits, I'm talking about crew cohesion, and I say one of the best things about my firehouse is we have individual bunk rooms. And they're like, oh, that's cool. And I said, one of the worst things about my firehouse is we have individual bunk rooms. But we developed like a common area where our kitchen and day room is one room. So our kitchen table or dining room and day room is one room. The kitchen's just on the other side. But it allows for that congregation. And when I tell folks, they're like, well, these new places you can't do anything. I'm like, no, there's a lot you can do, but that's crew dependent. It's kind of like working out together. everybody's going to be at different fitness levels, and if the CrossFitters want to go at 10, and then the guys that are just trying to make themselves a little bit better want to go at 11, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I know sleep's a hot topic, and I didn't know how much you went into it with your needs analysis, and I just know there's so much more related to sleep that a lot of us don't realize, and I didn't realize how much you know was involved with that until I'm like, all right, hey, when I first started being up all night, that was pretty cool. And then, there was a few times where I'm like, I don't remember the last 15 minutes of this car ride. What? Make sure I didn't hit anybody, but once I found I think it was listen to Jacqueline Toomey from listen to her speak on
First
behind the
responder sleep
field. Yeah,
recovery.
listen to her with some ideas, and then being involved with 62 Romeo. It's like I have still have bad nights here and there, but overall, I feel so much more rested now than I did a year ago before I started that program, because I have some simple techniques that I can use, and um, I know it doesn't work for everybody, but like the eye rest movement is probably by far one of my go-to. If if I go on a call at 1 o'clock in the morning and I cannot turn my brain off when I get back, I play that YouTube clip, and next thing I know, I'm like, all right, I'm time to go home. So
Well, and I'll put the link for 62 Romeo in the show notes because it is a great program. But one of the things that I find myself having this conversation with a lot of chiefs, because they'll say something to me like, Annette, here's the thing, like, I can't have my guys sleeping in the chairs. What if the public sees them sleeping on duty? I can't have my guys running around the station. What if the public sees them running around and working out on duty? Like, we don't pay them to, the public doesn't pay them to sleep or work out. But here's my argument, Chief. You go ahead and ask the public how many of them work a 56-hour work week, and then you ask them how many of them have to get up multiple times at night to go on a call, and then you find out how many of them want the paramedic on that call doing a drug calculation while they haven't exercised and they're sleep deprived. Go ahead and ask them, and you will be surprised at how much support you get for having healthy, well firefighters.
yeah. Tactical naps, they're a good ingredient. So
They're awesome. They're awesome.
so
All right,
moving
what's
along from
next?
okay, well, fitness testing.
Yeah.
So I know it's a hot topic in some places. We use a fitness test, and we had a very good implementation where um, we had some trial and error stuff over course of a career, and I think on the third fitness assessment test. Uh, when I got hired, everybody's doing functional fitness agility tests, and when I went in to do the agility test in 2001, it was like you're going to have to do the V sit and reach. It was called the Aero test, and I was just like, I got to touch my toes. I've never been able to do that. Oh my gosh! And I still got hired. So, and then we did like a functional thing, which it was good fireground stuff, but there was no real way how to measure it. So we're doing and I think it's whatever's the one the international's holding. It calculates your mets, and
Yep.
I think
Wellness
you're
and
talking.
Fitness
Yeah.
Initiative. Yeah.
So we had a decent implementation time where we're like, hey, these first few years, there's no penalties against you, but you'll have your measurements of where you're at. We did the in-body um, um, scans, and so everybody had a general idea of what was coming down the line. And we started the punitive action, and I use that term loosely because it's like they've given folks very very good opportunities to help themselves improve. And we had one, I think, that did wonders with it. Somebody else, not so much. So with the implementation, Um, or actually, my question with fitness testing in general, is there better concept to go with, like the internationals? I mean, obviously it's been tested, it's endorsed, whatever. Um, there are departments I know they come up with their own work performance. So between those two, is it just something that would be catering to your department, or is one going to be more superior because it's calculating your METs versus how quickly you can complete the course?
Great question. And when you look at fitness testing, you have to look at it two different ways. The first way you can look at it is I'm doing fitness testing to compare you to last year, and I'm using these results to design a program for you that's going to help you improve. So, the Wellness and Fitness Initiative test, in my opinion, is an okay measure for that. So if you do poorly on your treadmill test, it's quite obvious. And you, on your in body scan, many departments don't have that, but some departments do skin fold calipers. So if you do poorly on your body composition and your treadmill test, it's pretty clear to me. We need to get you more fit cardiovascularly and we need to get you leaned down a little bit. And that's going to improve probably everything. So there's fitness testing for the sake of guiding programming. And then there's fitness testing for the sake of determining fit for duty, which sounds like more what you guys are doing. And so when you're looking at fit for duty, you have to be careful because the test has to be reliable and valid. And when you're using a screening test for fit for duty, you also have to understand that you could always undergo litigation. And so, researchers like Dr. Jay Dawes, Dr. Mark Abel, they do a lot of research into reliability and validity of fit for duty testing. There's also a company in, I believe it's in Indianapolis, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, but that company will actually come out and help you validate your own test. And so if you say, Paul, I think on my department test, I would like a ladder raise, a hose advancement, a up and down the stairs with a hose pack and crawl through a maze, and then finish up with 3 minutes on the step mill, whatever. If you say that that is your test, the company will come out then and run all of your people through the test and get all of the results. And then they'll come back to you and say, here's the bell-shaped curve. Here's, where the primary number of people fit into the completion time on the test. They may even have you or other officers watch some people complete the test, and without telling you the time, they would say, does that person look like they're keeping a reasonable pace? And so you yay or nay on that. And they actually help you validate the test with a time parameter that sort of works for your department. And then they work on implementation with you, saying, okay, are we going to phase this in through 2 years? Everyone knows they need to complete the test in 6 minutes, but they don't have to do it for 2 years. And also, what's the plan for rehabilitation once someone doesn't pass? And that, I think, is a great way to make sure your test is valid and reliable. The other thing that you can look at is a previous guest, Vanessa Frost, she does 4 different fit for duty tests throughout the year. They're all different, but she talks a lot about how the rehabilitation process works. And she said, I think only one person ever in the history of their department has said, like, sayonara, no thank you, I don't care to go through this rehab process. So I think there is a danger with fit for duty when the test isn't reliable and valid, and also when the department doesn't have in place the so what, now what. Annette didn't pass the test. Okay, good, you're on your own. Good luck. 6 months, you have 6 months. You have to have ways to rehabilitate those people.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen where people had anxiety with anything that there's punitive related to it. I mean, you can call it whatever. Um, you know, some people are going to feel like if I get pulled off the line and got to go see the doctor, that's punitive, even
Hmm.
though the ultimate goal is to make them better. So, and I've seen it develop where we started a testing process where there was no, okay, there's here's your time limit. Yeah, just do better next year. There was no follow up. Now with this, with actually having a printout, but like, oh right, you've gained weight. Why is that? Oh, because you've gained muscle. Awesome. Or um, hey, you've gained weight. Hey, your Mets dropped. Is this because you're getting older, or are you not doing anything? And for a lot of folks, it was a wake up call to do something. Um, we had some folks that did retire after starting that, just because they were like, it's easier for me to retire than to get better. And then they found with their health and retirement was like, I want to live a little bit longer, so let me start dropping some weight. So I think it's had a positive, even though there was some punitive stuff with ours, it's had a positive reaction overall with making themselves better. And our our PFTs, I mean, they're willing to help everybody, but it's one of those things that kind of comes down to personal responsibility. Like, hey, I'm having a hard time with mobility. Everything I'm trying on my own is not working. YouTube's great, but I'm not following through with the foundation exercises that I'm seeing. What else is there? And I think as long as you're paired up with the right person that I've seen, and you're willing to do the work, you're going to see some type of small success. And I think some people get frustrated quickly because they're not getting the instantaneous fast food result. And 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 I just with fitness testing in general, I know that was one of the hangups we had with it. Now a couple years into it, it's kind of like, hey, we know it comes out this time of the year. I think the only thing that I would rather see, and I get where we don't do it, and we're is just putting out information year long about, hey, try these stretches on a regular basis, do these types of exercises year round, and not necessarily, hey, you need to do these things to be successful in your fitness testing, but just to be a better functional person. Because you know we all do change over the course of our career, where you know we tell the recruit class, hey, this is the most fit you will ever be in your entire life. It's up to you to maintain that throughout your career. But what are we giving them once they leave? It's like, hey, just remember all the workouts you did at the academy, or hey, here's a poster here and there. So, do we put out some type of other technology, or do we put out, something on a learning platform to be like, hey, let's follow along? So, that kind of leads me into my question about technology with health and wellness. So I know there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of apps out there. Some of them are, got free resources. I know just social media in general has abundance of resources, and like, I'll joke with you when you post something about, hey, this is legit. I'm like, hey, it has AC seal of approval. I know it's not garbage, but if generational gap speaking, I know if I follow, my local gym's fitness app, um, it offers some basic stuff gearing towards our our career field. And I know there's some good people on Instagram with all that stuff. But are there apps that you would say, hey, this offers some basic movements for firefighters. This is going to help you improve if you follow it, but also consulting the guidance of a PFT or a trainer.
I love this question. Um, and I'm going to start with just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Texas National Guard spent a ton of money, I think around 100K, on an app for the Guard members. And they have just this tiny percentage of people actually using it. I think like 10 to 15% of the people actually use it. I don't know about the quality of the app. I just know they spent a lot of money on it. And my experience with apps has been they're super general. And if you don't have any challenges at all, if you just follow along with it, you're probably going to do okay. There's definitely better quality programming out there. Like my friend Vernon Griffith he delivers programming through Train Heroic, and it's outstanding. So he would be someone that I would recommend. But I'm actually going to use this to explain why instead of spending $100,000 on an app, it would probably be better to look for an embedded professional, because that embedded professional can not only guide and weaponize the PFTs and educate the PFTs, but simply having that person on staff taking care of your people is a huge recruitment and retention point, in my opinion. And there's the potential to save money in workers' comp. For example, if a firefighter comes to me that I take care of and he explains to me, I rolled my ankle, this, that, and the other thing. I'm not an athletic trainer, so I'm going to stay within my scope of practice and within my lane. I'm going to ask him a few questions, and I can either get him to the right professional quickly, or I can, run him through a couple of tests, and together we can decide, what, actually, I feel pretty good. And if there's no person there to take care of that firefighter either doesn't report it until it becomes a big problem, or they do what a lot of departments have to do, which is what I call hyper reporting. They report everything for fear of something being something, and then workers' comp coming back later and saying you made it up or whatever. So they report everything from a paper cut to I bumped my knee on the wall, just because they feel like they have to. So having that embedded professional in place to take care of people, I think, is the chef's kiss of what we can do. But as far as an app, I would probably investigate an independent person such as Vernon before I would look for a company that's pushing out mass firefighter training information, because I just haven't seen any that's great.
Gotcha. And I know sometimes, being technology dependent, it's like, hey, we'll create an app for it, or we'll get an app for it. And I'm doing some research now with a wellness app, and on paper it looks really great. And we tried, we're using a trial version, and there's a significant cost with it, which sometimes at city level it's like, yeah, it's not a big deal. But I'm like, yeah, but it needs to do a lot more than just one thing. And like, if we can have all our behavioral health resources, and it could be like a notification platform, and the family members and retired members can have access to it, yeah, I see a lot more value than just say, hey, this is something you can use. And especially if you only had like 10% of 500 people using it, it's like, yeah, there's other ways we go about it.
It's like Firehouse reports, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
If it's not good content on the front end, the app isn't great content either.
So like with that, I mean, with simple things that we could do, I know some people are bigger with like creating some small lessons on like a QR code or something like that. I mean, that sounds like, is that something like that's pretty simple enough where PFTs could create like, hey, this is an exercise that we've been using in the recruit class. Um, let's send these QR codes to the fire station, and then people can scan it, and then it kind of links you to something where, all right, this is how I do it. This is what I can do. And do you see any value with stuff like that?
Yes, and consistency is key.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start out of the gate like you're given a QR code every Friday, and then all of a sudden it's every other Friday, and then all of a sudden it's every 3 months, people lose that consistency. Yeah. So it takes a while for them to come to it, and then it's easy to lose them. And that's another I'm back on the soapbox about an embedded person, but if you have someone whose job it is to take care of your people, they can have that as one of their tasks.
Yeah.
Whereas the pure fitness trainers are doing it in their free
Yeah.
time on duty. And that gets real old, especially if you're busy.
Yeah, and I personal experience with like I running the peer support team for several years now. I used to put out a behavioral health bulletin, and it was not hard to put together, but it was like in the year that I started, we had some significant events that was just like all right, and we were also that was the year that I guess everybody decided to address the elephant in the room with Life Initiative number 13 and just say, hey, we're going to push this on the forefront and doing it and just getting help with it was hard enough, but getting it out there, but getting the message out and doing it not so often where people are like, oh god, here's one more bulletin, and but it was also like we're putting out the information, people understood it, but it was also at that time I realized this this is going to be like cancer prevention where there's no end game and trying to stay up on the most up to date stuff. It's kind of like it's man, we're going to need the budget conferences, so I'm not putting out old information or and I can see that on the physical fitness side where it's like you know if back in the day you need to eat 16 eggs raw and then lift with your back. And now it's like, hey, let's protein's good, but not too much, and lift with your legs. So I can see where staying up on the something that is designed as an ancillary duty is hard enough, and having those embedded professionals definitely can be part of their daily routine. Um, so going in with those professionals that understand public safety and you've had a lot of great ones on your podcast that it's just like man that'd be so cool if we had it and understanding a lot of the return on the investment where they're all important, but if you had a strength and conditioning coach, registered dietitian, and um, a behavioral health specialist all in a room and you could only start with one with building out your program, who would you start with?
D, athletic trainer, because they can do much of what a physical therapist can do. The price point is probably a little bit lower. And if you could get an athletic trainer who is also a strength and conditioning coach, you get double bang for your buck. Behavioral health, so important. Nutrition, so important. But saving in terms of return on investment, I go athletic trainer.
Athletic trainer. And I know you've spoken about before where some places just like, hey, we'll just get the college intern to do it. How much experience would you be looking for if you were to hire an athletic trainer?
That is a great question. And I would say 5 years working with teams. So, not 5 years working in a clinic, 5 years working with athletic teams, and then bonus for cultural competency. So, bonus for they've done something with public safety, or they've gone through a Citizens Fire Academy, or they've taken the time to figure out the difference between a hose and a hydrant.
Mm-hmm.
It was so cute. An athletic trainer recently told me, she was like, I didn't realize that you didn't hook the hose that you were fighting the fire with directly to the hydrant. I was like, oh, no, that's not how it works.
I don't have to do that. And I can't say that it doesn't happen sometimes in the world, but you know.
Yes, athletic trainer, number one. And here's the thing, I always give the disclaimer. I'm not an athletic trainer, and I still say athletic trainer.
Gotcha. And that's good to know because I know there's a lot of those folks they can kind of do both, but having this specific job function. And I know that helps with people when they're trying to budget and try to, get that buy-in at different levels. And I know some places grow and expand. It's something that they can uh, budget into their capital programs where, like, hey, if we're going to build a new training facility, maybe we can, along with the new IT guy to build all these programs, we can incorporate this athletic trainer um, into it. So, um, getting a little bit into the money side of things, do you find that sharing costs between two different departments is beneficial, or for example, I know you've talked about like your mutual aid box where um, a couple localities might chip in on this or that. So say like my agency, we're a decent sized metro department. Um, police and fire, neither one of them have like an athletic trainer. So if they were to kind of go into the cost sharing, is there a benefit with that, or is that something where we should try to keep separate?
Whatever decreases your barrier to entry. So if it decrease, how many personnel do you have on the fire side?
We're just under 500.
Oh, Lordy mercy. I would love for you to have an athletic trainer plus, but if it decreases your barrier to entry to share that athletic trainer with the cops, then do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it decreases the barrier of entry for an agency my size with 87 line personnel to share it with the next door agency who has 76, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it takes to get that person in, because you can. I preach a lot about not doing substandard stuff. Like, I really believe that something is not always better than nothing. But in this case, if you're getting a professional, qualified, competent athletic trainer, I say do whatever you have to do to get them in.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you're going to find is that person is overwhelmingly so busy. And then you can look at the data and go, wow, this is cool.
Yeah.
Now we can afford another person, whether that is now your behavioral health or your whatever. Pretty soon you're going to, for 500 firefighters plus police, you're probably going to need 2 or 3 athletic trainers to really cover the ground that you
Yeah.
need.
Gotcha. Let's see. Well, what else I got?
I say we probably have time for one more question because
Yeah.
I have a call with the researcher who is that poor woman does not know what's going to hit her.
I would say so challenges for the fire service. We'll go along those lines. So with health and wellness challenges that you foresee, I mean, we know current day what the issue is, and it seems like it's maintained, unfortunately, throughout the years. I do see people taking aspects of it a little bit more seriously, and just seeing reading line of duty deaths. I still know there's still a lot of cardiac stuff. And depending on which year, it might be actual working fires or car wrecks or whatever. But the biggest challenges that you see the future generation of the fire service facing with health and wellness.
Mm. So you're probably not quite as old as I am, but I was raised on home cooked meals. I lived on a farm for a short amount of time. I drank raw milk, vegetables out of the garden. It sounds like my parents were hippies, but they weren't. We did not eat fast food as a child. I did not drink soda pop. Um, I didn't play video games, which in some respects actually makes my life harder as an adult, but I didn't sit and watch TV. So as a young adult, I was relatively fit. Our young adults are not relatively fit. And so we will continue to have problems with cardiovascular disease and cancer 100%. But here's the bright, shiny light that I see. I'm having South Metro Fire on as a guest, several of their people in a few episodes, and they're going to talk about a screening process that they're using for cardiovascular disease where they're catching things in asymptomatic people. And so I think once their case studies and their research starts to come out, I think standard of care in the fire service will change. And I think we'll start catching these cardiovascular disease issues much earlier than when the person has a heart attack on the fire ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the level of fitness will unfortunately continue to decline, the level of wellness coming in, but I think our screening processes are going to get better. Also, my department's having UDS out to do our abdominal organs and thyroid and, ultrasounds. And so they're able to catch things quicker than in the past too. So screening is going to get better. Health is unfortunately going to continue to deteriorate.
Yeah, we actually just did this past year the Galleria screenings, and it actually caught on to a couple of other departments in the area where we were fortunate, where I think we, out of everybody that took it, and it wasn't everybody, I would say it was probably 350 to 400 people took it, so a good portion of our department. I think there was only like two that came back positive. One was a false positive, and I don't know about the other one, but a neighboring department, they took it and they found they have, I think it's 3 or 4 people that had significant type cancers that were all asymptomatic. And I know it's an expensive test, but it was kind of like, I know we're in a process of kind of looking at like, all right, is this something we're going to add to our annual physicals? And I know the senior staff has kind of talked like, yeah, we know it's expensive, but the overall cost of cancer treatment, if you're able to catch something stage 1 versus stage 4 where it's symptomatic, it's going to save us money in the long run. So I appreciate them thinking, that long-term investment with our people, and hey, yeah, it's going to cost something, but everything's going to cost more to make you better.
Amen. Amen. Well, this has actually been super fun. I appreciate you and your questions and your support and your time, but I have to get to one more topic. It's very important.
All right.
I need you to tell me about Annie.
So we got her in 2015, and she was the runt of a litter, and most of the litter, I think, was they were Australian shepherds. They were mixed. I'm pretty sure she has a little border collie in there, but she is, as my wife says, my dog. Even though it's the family dog. We had, when my wife and I got married, she had a lab mix, and she was great with the kids when the kids came along, and then just she got sick, and then so we had a few years without a dog, and then we got this one, and I wasn't all about it at first because I'm like, I was a stay-at-home dad on my off days, and I'm like, it's hard enough but when I realized when both of them started going to school, there was some uncomfortable silence here at Daddy Daycare. So Annie has been able to fill that void, and um, we walk daily together. Some days are further than others. She was not happy about going our normal route in the rain, and she'll put on the brakes. So she kind of dictates which direction we go, and she's other than shedding hair, she is she's a great dog, and I never had a dog growing up, but we always had cats. But she is just, she'll tell you when it's time to go to bed. She'll start barking at you, be like, "Hey, you're up too late," and that's what my parents tell me when they watch her when we're out of town. But she's I think she's more of an Australian Kelpie than she is a Shepherd. But tiny little dog, and she, as I say, she gets me when I come home from the rougher shifts. She just kind of knows it's like, all right, I'm gonna sit with you, and then if she needs a little bit more attention or she needs to help me decompress, she'll just lay her head in my lap, and I'm like, all right, I'll keep giving you head rubs. So
You'll have to send me a picture on the Instagram messages so that I can put the picture of her up when your episode comes out.
all right, yeah, I got a decent one where I think it was the National Dog Day or whatever. I was sitting in the recliner, and she just kind of like, I had like a toothpick in my mouth, and she just kind of looked up at me. She's like, "That's a piece of plastic that looks like a treat. What else can you give me?" So yeah, I'll have to find out. I'll send that to you here in a while.
Oh, Annie. Well, this has been, as expected, super fun. Super, really great questions. I love it. And I guess we can probably sign off. So this has been AZ. Oh, how do you like this one? PP and Annie. And we are all officially out.